Good morning, LinkedIn. Happy Thursday. Welcome to another edition of Let's Build HubSpot Onboarding with our favorite customer success HubSpot guy, Willem Reus. How you doing, man?
Very good. And for everybody on my side of the puddle, good afternoon as well. Uh, because, of course, I'm in Europe. Uh, I think that for today we picked the topic basically how to look back and how to look at HubSpot for the onboarding part from a perspective like, let's say that we are 5 years or 3 years into the future. How are we going to look at that? And what are the issues that we would have encountered? And I think that that's a really exciting topic.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's an important one, especially right now, because no matter how hard it is to see into the future right now, as AI starts to play a role in everywhere in the business and with our customers, and trying to peer into, um, what might be there is difficult for even the smartest of people. Uh, and but still, like, that doesn't mean like your goals as a business, like, you still have to define those won't be those outcomes that you want to see when investing in a platform like HubSpot, when investing in the people uh, to utilize those tools, right? Even if some of those people are maybe AI agents at some point,
Yeah,
understanding what needs to get done on a daily basis to achieve those goals. You gotta think about it, instead of, what we often see is focusing on, okay, I just bought this thing, how am I going to get value right away? Let me send out some emails, show me how to do that, and then okay, we're done with onboarding.
yeah. But for me, it really is also because as a customer success manager, I see a lot of customers that did not do that well in the onboarding process and keep struggling. So for me, as I believe we talked about previously, on average, 50% of the CRM implementations fail. For HubSpot, that's a bit lower, but it still poses a tremendous risk. And if you are implementing a CRM system, and if you're going to say, I'm going to take a year, I'm going to take 2 years for that, shouldn't you do a risk assessment? Shouldn't you say, like, okay, let's say 5 years from now, what could have gone wrong? And if that went wrong, what should I have done 5 years ago to prevent that? And I think that that really is something powerful that a lot of companies don't spend the time on during the onboarding process or even before the onboarding process.
Yeah, I think any kind of feature assessment would be helpful. And this is definitely a place where I've experienced help from AI, from more of a positive angle, and saying, like, let's call it an opportunity assessment, and say, like, let's say we've achieved this thing. What had to be true for us to get there, right? Like,
Exactly.
and in this case, what had to be true in with our HubSpot implementation, right? Not necessarily in the first 90 days, but what do we need to do, and when, at least in which order does it make the most sense for us to achieve that thing? And at the same time, like, I almost would love to kind of say, like, start there and then identify risks, like, along the way, to say, like, okay, we weren't even thinking about, this hub or this kind of functionality. I don't have anybody on my team that can uh like have expertise or like do it themselves right now. So if we don't, then we're not gonna those are the kinds of risk assessments that I would love to see, in terms of relating it to, like, I think so often it goes wrong because we haven't resourced properly, right, to support the system. right?
It's not just that. What one of the main causes that I see with my customers is that somebody went through onboarding and either during or straight after the onboarding, gone. And then that person has really made an effort to consolidate all the knowledge and to make sure that nobody else in the company has that knowledge. Then the salary negotiation didn't go their way, and they are like, yeah, well, I'm out of here. And what that person takes with him or her is not just a bit of knowledge, but what does it cost to actually mess around for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, because you haven't implemented everything. And if you try to say, well, okay, let's look back 5 years while being in the future for 5 years, what can potentially go wrong? What happens if I onboard just one person?
Right. And
And
that's
it is like what can go right, but also what can go wrong.
right. And it is kind of what I'm getting at when I say resourcing it properly, because it's the kind of thing like when it's presented to you as a quick win solution, as a point solution that's just going to do emails. It's like, okay, Willem can handle that. I don't need to get
Yeah.
anybody else involved. Like Willem's enough, right? But then you start to do like, oh, we need the emails to look good. So we need to do some design work and we need to figure out messaging and all of these things. And it's like, oh, Willem's got a different job already. What we do is like, oh, we signed up Willem for this. I don't have anybody else ready to back up Willem. So I guess either we try to do it or we ask Willem to do it and he does a lot less other things. Like this is where accidental admins come from too, right? And I had an interesting conversation earlier this week where the company is looking into admin services so that the marketing manager can start doing marketing things because they haven't been able to do it because they're busy setting up HubSpot for the company, which I commend them to. Like, we need HubSpot to be working, but that's the kind of thing where you have to start picking and choosing what is being resourced, right? And that means generally, if you're picking and choosing, you're not clearly understanding the overall resources needed, right, to be successful with the platform or the things that, or to achieve the goals that you say that you want, right?
And in many cases with people, it's a zero-sum game. You can't say, "Ooh, you know what? You're gonna spend 40 hours a week on marketing, and you are gonna be as you mentioned, accidental HubSpot admin," which, would take, in many cases, a substantial amount of time. But there I will also question, is the marketing manager the right person to manage HubSpot? And that is not a yes/no question. It really is like, does that person understand the whole process well enough, including the sales process?
Right. No, I think
And
that's
what
a good point.
And what happens if you don't understand why you should set up, let's for now say, two pipelines instead of one or three? Let's say you think that, ooh, it's nice, and keep in mind that I'm in Europe, so the countries here are a lot smaller. There are more or less, I'm going to say, the size of a state in the US, which is not entirely true, but you get the idea. Let's say, and I see that a lot, that there are people who are like, let's build a different pipeline for every different country. That's the same as telling you, let's create a different pipeline for every different state. The sales process is exactly the same, but why not create the biggest mess that we can make? Unless you have somebody that can actually see into the future, like, okay, what will happen? Then perhaps you should involve a partner that has that capability. And what I really am a firm believer in is that you shouldn't try to outperform the competition. You should try to outfail the competition. If you find as many ways as possible to or have the understanding of how to break HubSpot, you will likely build the most robust platform that you can make. But try to figure out what may break and what may not.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good way to put it. It's better when you can be intentional about that instead of, just letting it happen. Like, because there is a lot of ways to trial and error your way. And that's how, again, that's why it's called accidental admin. Like, you were not brought on to do this thing. So naturally, as you try to set up pipelines, like, you either go the route of understanding, like, all we're trying to do is usually segment data in some way so that people can understand it better, or there's less confusion for the thing that you're asking a specific person to do, or now leadership can clearly see the data and all the different ways, pipelines being one of them, to segment data. But when it could have been done with just like a property drop down, right, of like product category or state or country, right, instead, that's where an accidental admin is not. They might have done it with the pipelines until somebody's like, whoa, like maybe you should just do this instead. And then they're like, yeah, that's absolutely right. let's do that. And I think Robert Smith makes a good point of, many of us typically end up becoming a HubSpot admin due to underestimation of what is needed. And you end up going down the rabbit hole. Oops, he says. That's, oh man, that resonates, right?
Yeah, that is spot on, basically. But for me, it really is like, okay, so you find yourself being accidentally the most handy person in HubSpot, and people will go to you with questions because, let's for now say, you start using HubSpot for marketing and you know best how to create a marketing email. You don't understand sales processes. Who will be responsible once they roll out sales in HubSpot as well? That will be you, despite that you've no clue what you're talking about. And yeah, then what? You set yourself up for failure. Think like, okay, 5 years into the future, what will this look like? We have somebody from marketing running the whole show. Does sales typically like marketeers? Why not? What happened? And there you have your answer.
Oh, yeah. I think that, yeah, this is why, like, the importance of leadership buy-in at this point. Like, in most organizations, they are the only ones that can viably think that far into the future, like for the organization, like in what the goals are for the business, right? Like, we could all do that at any level, but that is a very easy way to get off track and misaligned. Where if you're the marketing person, you're like, of course we're going to build out HubSpot like this because you're asking me to do this as a marketer and we're asking for this growth. And then you have sales with some mindsets. And that's where, without leadership kind of being there, like, no, we have these revenue goals. We want to take this place in the community, like, in everything in between. Because if you don't think about that up front, like, especially the bigger the company gets, so many things are like, okay, I mean, this is what leads to rip and replace activities, right? Like, you get a year or two down the road and all of a sudden we have this new initiative that quite possibly somebody has been working on the entire time. It just wasn't communicated. Then you find out we're ready to launch and the tool or platform that I have can't support, a very important piece of the puzzle. Like, that's what causes the rip and replaces I've seen. It's like, literally, we cannot do the thing we want to do, right? And so often it's like, you could have built it right and this system would have worked fine. But since you didn't, it's like so painful to think about like fixing this problem, right? And it's because you didn't think ahead, right?
But also, if you want to try to think ahead, then maybe as a marketeer, you should ask sales, what do you want to achieve? And why do you, and I'm going to say this really bad, but why do you not like marketeers? What is the cause of that? And looking into the future, and I know that that may sound really hard, but on the other hand, it is relatively simple. What happened in the last 5 years? We got a shitload more emails. And I'm just gonna use emails as the example, but that basically will go to any medium. What we have now is a built-in filter, and I mean us humans kind of filter like, I'm not gonna read that. What we automated was sending the emails. What will happen? What will we automate next? Reading the emails. You write me a marketing email that's not relevant, that will not come through the filter. So knowing that, what will sales need to do to get through what I'm going to call the filter now? How will that process look like? What will marketing at that point look like? What will sales look like? How can we set ourselves up in that environment for success? Let's try to build that right now.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought it up that way because that is so much of an important piece is as we think ahead, how can we make the people that we're asking to achieve the goals, how can we help them be successful? Right?
Yeah.
We forget about that part when we do think ahead. It's like, oh, we need this many leads, we need this many dollars, right? Let's bring in HubSpot. And then we don't think about positioning our people like in a way that they could possibly be successful. We design into the system marketing and sales misalignment, like inherently. When we say, okay, we're just going to let, the marketing team do all the prospecting and find all the leads. And you're like, what? Like sales is the one that why wouldn't they have some hand in this? They know they're closest to the customers and, you just create these barriers often because we have the new tool now. We've got to make it work. We've got to create this MQL system that we've never had before, but we're being told it's got to be that way. And then we can get the reports. And been thinking about that so much lately. Like when your goal is the leads, the kind of work that we do to define leads and to support that goal instead of like, we just need human conversations. We need human relationships.
If you start looking at from the top down, and you heard me advocate quite a bit that I think that the whole RevOps game is both top down as well as bottoms up. There's a combination. For me, it's never looking at it just one way. But for now, if we look at things top down, what should you look at first? Should you look at how many leads do we create? Should we look at what does marketing in total cost? Are you really interested in that? Are you really interested in what it does sales cost? Or is it no, both of them combined, sales and marketing, bring in a certain amount of cash flow? You can't attribute it correctly. So top down, you should look at the combined number and say, okay, how are we doing? How much money are we bringing in? What is the cost of sales and the whole GTM motion basically? And where are we? Because what we see a lot is that we bring in, let's for now say 10K in for a deal or in a time frame or whatever. And that is attributed to like 20 different departments and they're all smashing their targets. And in total, it's just the revenue is not there to justify the cost. but everybody is patting themselves on the back because, ooh, we are doing so fantastic. We brought in twice as many leads that didn't convert. Happy days. Sales will say, you know what, we closed that much in deals, but realistically, we get more deals, so we waste more time on something that we shouldn't waste it on. And that is like looking into the future, seeing that the whole volume game, which played really, really well for a lot of companies 5 years ago, will not continue to work.
Yeah. And often talking to most finance teams, it never worked, right? That's why, a lot of this, they couldn't pinpoint why. Like it just didn't feel right. Uh, so many of these activities, and it goes to trade shows too, right? Like you just start to see
Yeah,
the cost of some of these things. And if it's so fuzzy to try and relate it to how it gets to revenue, um, we haven't been as clear as we are now in saying like, okay, what is really impacting revenue, and thinking about it from a holistic perspective of the whole journey. There's a whole relationship being built. Everybody customer facing is involved. It's much less about who and when is having more of an impact. It's about like, are we having an impact overall? Right.
yeah,
And once you kind of define that, this is where leaders have to help like define that for the organization so that we can make sure our compensation structures, all of our internal processes don't create this like, oh, of course, sales is, they get commissioned. So they're the closers, right? They're the
yeah,
ones that are doing the work, right? I can attribute revenue to them because I have to pay them based on the revenue. Like, and that's it, right? It's so
very
much
true.
dysfunction comes from like somebody else being heavily involved in the sale and not getting that commission. And it's like people feel that it's not right, right? Uh,
Yeah, but how do you attribute everything correctly? Let's say that
we
somebody had
don't,
6 touch points in marketing, then had one failed sales conversation because the deal didn't go through because they were still in contract. But that rep did a phenomenal job and they're fully convinced, but the deal is lost. And 6 months later, they show up and they're like, yeah, I'm just ready to sign. Give me the contract because I already know everything.
yeah,
Shouldn't that sales rep that did a fantastic job get some credit? Should marketing get some credit? Or is it just whoever they show up to is like, yeah, I got a hand raiser, and this is 100% me?
right,
Pros and cons. And if you start looking at the metrics top down in the largest scope that you can find, so throwing everything sales and marketing just in one bucket, then at least you can see, is the business doing well or is the business not doing well? If you try to give everybody a piece of the pie, then everybody's happy, everybody's doing fantastic. The company may or may not go bankrupt.
yeah.
And,
It's
and that is what I really feel like we should all see that coming. If we set up a system to bring it a little bit back to onboarding, what kind of incentive do we set up? How do we calculate that? What kind of reports do we actually need in HubSpot? And I know I'm asking a rhetorical question, but can't we, shouldn't we bring in some financial data so that we can do more advanced reporting? I don't know. It depends on the business. Should we get an integration for that? Should we
or
just
just
take
buy a
that
company.
or just buy a company or anything like that? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's the piece that's not connecting, in my opinion, for a lot of people. Like when we talk about customer platform, when we talk about Commerce Hub, we start having these conversations about revenue reporting, because I think at the very top level, almost every company, hands down, there's a revenue goal that we can work backwards from, right? And as soon as we start working up from something like leads, like you're just already in a bad place, right? Because you can, like, this movement towards go-to-market teams, revenue teams, like all this whole group of people working together to hit these revenue goals. And then either you are or you're not, you're tracking towards them or you're not. And whether you are or you aren't, starting to go from there and saying, okay, which channel is this coming from? Which campaign, right? Starting to understand from that perspective. Because this motion of, like, especially on LinkedIn, right? And this has been the cause of people not taking more advantage of LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's
Because
so
it's
hard to
completely
measure.
a dark
Like,
funnel.
the marketing person posts something, right? Gets engagement, then the salesperson comes in, answers the question, right? And does their job of but it happened on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is the place for marketing. And it's like, what are we doing here? Right. So I think that top level that you mentioned, starting with this most general place, let's say revenue, and then working backwards, because we do need to know what's working and what we're investing in and some level of ROI. But this disconnect, because we've been focused on the smaller KPIs, let's call them, this disconnect between a revenue picture in HubSpot and a revenue picture in the accounting system or in the ERP, like just completely different mindset. And I was excited to see the acquisition, or the pending acquisition of Cashflow, because we really, I'm starting to see why this disconnect is there when we start talking about every piece of revenue reporting being associated with deals, right? Absolutely. And why is it going to be so hard to transition to orders or to another mechanism to see a complete picture? And it's helping me understand, like, there's never been a complete picture when we're relying on HubSpot. It's always marketing and sales world, right? And then there's somewhere else in the business that shows the real picture of revenue, which is where the CFO and the CEO are looking, right? So it's like, okay, you guys go have your marketing and sales fun over there. We'll just be understanding how we're cashing checks and how we're paying checks. And maybe we'll look at close rates and stuff eventually, but until you can show and connect those pieces, it's not a complete story, right?
No, but I'm gonna take it one step further. Without understanding the total cost of sales and marketing and the breakdown of that, it's still not a complete story. But at least it gets you one step further. And as long as you can't put in your hours in as, let's say, an IC, so an individual contributor, or if there is no cost associated to you as a sales rep or marketing rep, then it's still pretty hard to truly have a unique picture and a unique perspective saying, like, okay, this is the total cost. Because of course you can get the Facebook data or the metadata in there about what you spend there, but currently not what the people cost.
Right. And it's going to be super exciting to see people start connecting these dots. We've already done it. The shows I've done with, Max Cohen about event management and showing expenses and costs right next to, revenue and campaigns. Like, it's just a simple act of showing these things in the same place, right? And most organizations have tried to go the other way, where ERPs say they have CRM, so you try to bring this out, but it always misses the feature pipeline stuff, because it's got to be real data in the real financial system. So you can't have open opportunity. So you're completely missing this other piece. And I look forward to really seeing this come to fruition, and helping people inside of the ecosystem realize that this gap is it's not that hard to cross. But when you don't understand it's there, you will fall in it every single time. right?
But also, people should realize that in 5 years' time, HubSpot will look different. Their business will look different, and the gap that we talk about today will be solved.
Yes, indeed.
And of course, we cannot guarantee, but that's pretty much a given.
Yeah, we will continue to go the platform route and fill these gaps, at least functionally, right? That's where strategically we need to be ready as partners and stakeholders in the ecosystem to help businesses understand that those gaps are filled, and hopefully we're doing it in a better way than they've done it before. And that's why we're here. If you don't understand any of that at the time of onboarding, pretty hard to look into the future as far as what HubSpot can do for you as a business. So hopefully this was helpful. I appreciated this different look at onboarding. And as we head into next week, we've got a very exciting, I think action plans are going to be back from Matt at Super. Going to be unboxing them. Hopefully they're ready. And I think they will be.
That will be really excited.
Yeah, because that's one of the ways that what we're talking about, like built right into how everybody should be using this platform every day, that is going to help you achieve, those future set goals. So as we look ahead to next week, find those opportunities and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody. Awesome.